All right, everybody. Hello again, and welcome back to Higher Labs Coding Bootcamp. Those of you that have joined us on time, thank you for being online. Those of you that can't make it tonight, I know some folks already let me know, like usual. Appreciate the heads up. Please keep following along with the videos, even if you can't make it to class. And this goes for everybody online or in watching the videos and trailing along. Feel free to reach out, set up some time with me one-on-one. Steve, I know you reached out on email and we kind of chatted a little bit back and forth about it. If you want to set
Hmm.
up some time where we can look more deeply into that, we could, block off a half hour and I could help you debug and figure out what's going on.
Okay.
Help with just make sure you understand the concepts and what's happening. That's an open offer to anybody taking this course. You've
Okay.
been, you're part of the community. That's what we do. So don't hesitate to use that. Reach out to me, reach out to each other, reach out to us, reach out to everyone, and just ask questions, and we'll get this. So we're gonna crack on our week 5 of 6. So we're close to being at the end, but we're not quite at the end. We're still in back end design and development this week. We're on day 10, and we're going to continue implementing our CRUD operations that we started last time. And as a reminder, we're going to do this a couple of times. CRUD is the acronym for operations we done to a database. Again, I said using SQL, but it's just general databases. So CRUD is acronym for create, read, update, delete. That's what we're doing. So we're building these functions into our platform so that our end users, keeping them in mind with our design decisions and what we're doing here, the function that we're trying to deliver to our users is the ability to create, read, update, and delete tasks in the context of our to-do list. So last time we did read, and today we are going to work on create. We're going to add a way to add new tasks to our list that we can see. And we're going to keep update and delete for next week, next Tuesday, because update and create are very similar, but they take a little bit of time to set up. And I want to make sure we have plenty of time to do both. Excuse me. And then delete is very simple. It's very, very short, and we can finish that up at the end. And then, depending on how much time we have on Tuesday, we may go through a slightly advanced refactoring and run through these 4 operations as classes. We're going to continue to write them as um, functions, functional views, function-based views. And then, um, again, time permitting, we'll go through and rewrite them, refactor them into classes, and use the really cool inheritance feature in Python classes to make a lot of the things that we do explicitly in the functions faster, and kind of grab that. If we don't get to that in class next Tuesday, if we get through just these things in functional views, the class refactoring will be in the documentation, and we can leave that for you to get done on your own. But for today, we're definitely going to get through create. We got plenty of time to do it, plenty of time to ask questions and walk through. There's quite a bit of code to write, but send out the documentation ahead of time. So again, do not hesitate to copy and paste. Copy and pasting it's the best, not the best, but do it as a beginning point. The most important thing here is to understand what is happening and to get it running. And then you can go through and write it yourself. You can go through and change things and play around with it. The main thing is to understand what's happening and to get it running. All right. So again, create is what we're going to focus on today. And before we do that, one quick slide about concepts. So we talked already about a request on this little chart thing that we have here. This picture that I snagged from somebody on the internet shows very well the things that are happening in HTTP. And again, if we recall, that stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. So it's the rules by which people send text files around. It constitutes the internet. So we've talked very much about directories and files, and the algorithms, the instructions are in the files, in the directories. And when we built our first views, our functional views that we did so far, the reading and the index and the about page and all those sorts of things, we used request, as you see here on the chart. There's the end user with a browser, and then the first arrow that's going towards this big API says request. So we've mentioned that already. We've sent this request already. What this is showing is that every time a user sends something into to our API, so the thing that we're building, it sends a request with information in it, and that's going to go back to the server, and the server is going to send a response back with the information that we want, right? So we've done this already with read operations. The reason I put this here is because now when we're going into the next operation, the create operation, we're going to refer to things in slightly different terms, but it's the same thing. So I just want to explain this concept, show you what it is, and then it'll make sense when we go to write these things, what it is we're saying and what it is we're using. So the way this is done in this communication can be done in a number of different styles of sending things from end users, which don't necessarily have to be humans. We think of them usually as humans with browsers, but the requests can come from any sort of system things, usually a user with a browser. So the request comes into our API, so the thing that we're building, something that handles it. It can be other APIs we can connect to, like Google's pretty incredible list of APIs, and do cool stuff with maps or whatever language processing you want to do. And then we'll send information to the server, right? Backend systems, and do things back here, store it in the database, do all those sorts of functions, and then we'll send responses back, right? And we're going to do that again with our create stuff today. But we're going to keep in mind this framework called REST. You may see this around. It's called REST framework for this communication. You see RESTful APIs and things like that. We're not going to dive really deeply into this, but the concepts that are relevant here are the way that they refer to the things that we're doing. The create, read, update, and delete operations have slightly different terms under this sort of framework, which is, again, very common. So post, all caps post, is the way that you send in a request a bunch of data that you want to save to create a record, right? So when we're doing our create operations today, we're going to be doing a post request. So that's why I wanted to explain all of this, because we're going to be using post today. Now, technically, we've already been using get when we did our read operations. When we set up the get is going to the server and is getting the template to do our index. It's getting the template to do our about page. It's getting all the information that's in the database to say what the tasks are. So we've already done get 3 times. We didn't have to do it explicitly. Today, we're going to write post explicitly. So I want to make sure we knew exactly what it is we're saying, right? So post is sending information in the request that is going to be saved on the server. So you're creating a record. The other parts of this, the way they're referred to, can be put, which again, update, we're going to get to updating later. And we don't really explicitly write that. It's going to be post most of the time that we mess with. And then delete, again, that's called the same. So that's the same term. But this is kind of how these things are, the way that these things are referred to in the context of HTTP and the communications online as part of REST APIs and this whole function, right? And the last thing to kind of keep in mind about REST APIs and what it even means is that they're stateless. So the server doesn't save client's data between requests. It's good to keep in mind. It's not going to be impactful for what we're doing here. We're not really worried about that level of depth. But if you ever wanted to try to define that, this is a good place to start. It's a good thing to look into REST APIs and understand a little bit better how they work. But the main focus of why I explain this is because we're going to be using post, and I don't want it to be confusing anyone on what that is. It's just sending information in this request as looking at this chart, right? So any big questions about that before we dive into the fun part of the coding? All right. No questions. And I do encourage you, again, to follow along as best you can. Write these things with me. If it's too fast, if it's typing too quickly and things like that, try to type along with the videos as practice to get faster, because typing quickly is very helpful, and you'll just get better at it as you do it. But again, copy and paste. Have the doc open next to it and copy the section that I'm doing and paste it in to make sure you got it right, and just go through the motions of making the files, making the directories, setting things up. Going through this practice step of going to our dashboard, Python Anywhere. We're going to open up our console. And please take yourself off mute and ask questions. If you have questions along the way, or raise your hand, get my attention. So we're going to start the way we always do. And I am also going to follow along with the documentation that I gave out.
Jeff.
Yeah.
Really quick, I got a question. Going back to that slide as far as the post get put and delete record.
Sure.
Real world scenario, right? Like, and I know this is probably self-explanatory, but in the case of like Gmail, right? If we open up our Gmail and we want to compose a mail, is it an API integration that's happening from the browser where we as an end user, we're clicking on create mail, which prompts the compose.
Yeah.
And then when we send it, it's posting to the server, gets a record and so forth. Is that like in some kind of like, I guess, near logical parallel that this is happening?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what's happening. So you're doing this all over the place. And that's a great example, Cody. Thanks for bringing that up specifically with email. Totally. That's how it's working. Like you compose your email, that's being stored somewhere, probably in memory, because Google's notorious, especially Gmail, it's notorious for using a lot of memory. But then when you send it, there's some manner of post thing happening. There's a lot more going on with email. Email is kind of a more complex,
right,
situation. But generally, yeah, there's some sort of post type thing going on there, right? You're
Okay.
sending information out to the server. So
Okay,
you
cool.
would think of it
Thank you.
that way. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, good question. Cool. Any other questions? Right on. All right. Good stuff. All right. So we're in the Bash console, like we normally do. We're going to start off setting up our virtual environment using source space name of the virtual environment. So VM in my case. And I'm using tab complete to make sure I'm in the right place. So I start typing the first couple of letters, hit tab, make sure that it is what I expect. So bin activate source name of your virtual environment /bin/activate. Hit enter. See the name of your virtual environment over here on the left next to the UTC time, the tilde and the $sign. And then we're going to move into our my site directory to make sure we're in our working directory so we can run any manage.py commands or anything else that we need to do from
Jeff,
here.
can I ask a question?
Nope, no more questions. Sorry, time for that pass. No, I'm joking. Yeah, go ahead. What's up?
Because I know everything already, right?
Yeah, you're done, man. You already got it. So
What's the command for navigating back through that process, like from back to my site, back to the original?
So CD is the change directory, and that's how you get around everything. So if you ever want to just get home from wherever you are and you don't remember where you are, if you type
Yeah.
CD with nothing else and just hit enter, it always takes you home.
Okay.
So you do CD to whatever place you want to go. You can even go all the way down to your root and just do CD root and just hang out there. But then you're like, oh, I forget how to get home. Just hit CD and it'll take you right home.
All right. Cool. Thanks.
Sure, sure. Question. All right, so we are in our my site. Always misspell clear. That's another thing. Aliases. I set an alias for what I misspell for another course though. All right, so we're in the top level project directory my site. Just in case we need to run anything here, we probably aren't going to today, but this is just a good habit to get into. Again, this is all practice habits. The first thing that we're going to do today is set up what's called namespace. So namespace is a way for Django to sort of keep URLs from colliding with each other. So I'm going to do a little bit of work with our URLs, refactor some things, and set it up in a more sort of Django way of doing it. That's going to help us create things and do the whole sending information to that post request, doing something in the server, and then rerouting, redirecting, as we call it, the user back to another page, because we're not going to send them to the server with the information that they sent. There's nothing to see there. They have to go somewhere. So that whole process is going to be better done if we start by using what's called namespace to set up our URLs in a way that they won't conflict with each other. So we're going to start by doing that. To do that, we're going to go over to files again. I'm just going to go ahead and do it here because we're probably not going to do much in our console and come back to it if we need to. But I'm just going to go over to our files and we go to our URLs in the to-do application. So my site, to-do, urls.py. Remember, this is where we've defined most of our URLs up to now. So we've got our view task. The last one we did earlier. So this is our read operation. And what we're going to do to namespace these URLs, this pattern is very simple. We're just going to add a variable up here on line 4. It's called app underscore. If I can write an underscore name is, and then we'll give it the name of this app. So we're going to use to do because that's the name of the app. And now that's it. We've namespaced it. So we have to do a couple other things to make sure that this works right and we don't break what we already have. But what this means is that now this index is what's called namespace. So it's no longer going to be considered the larger project index. It's going to be specific for this to-do application. So now if we made another application, this came up before about how index is a very common name to give something, right? We gave our landing page view tasks as the name because it's the view that you get. But again, if you're making this as a standalone product or something like that, and you wanted a different landing page, you might call that index. So each application you make might have its own index. It might have its own about. It might have its own view, whatever, right? Like it might have all these views, all these URLs might be the same. So the purpose of putting this up here is that the application name has to be unique in a Django project anyway. You can't have more because again, they're directories. So you can't have the conflicting directories. It'll break everything. So it won't let you do that. So use that name to say, okay, all of these are now considered part of this application. And that resolves or prevents conflict. So every one of your applications can have index and about if you namespace things, and it won't break anything. So that's conceptually what it's doing. The next step that we would like to do here, sort of architecturally, is since we've namespaced this and these two that we were using here, these two paths are more project level. So what we should do is move them up to the project level URLs and set that up to be able to handle our namespaced things and not break. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut these out. So I'm just going to cut those two by hitting Control X, highlight those two past the index and the about, and I'm going to save this. So the to-do URLs now just has the view tasks, and that's it, but it's been namespaced. So we're going to go adjust our top level URLs in my site, MySpace, my site, right? My site, urls.py. And here at the top, I want to draw your attention to this. We're going to do some of these, but a lot of these patterns and things that we're doing are up here in this string, right? So this tells you how to do function views. This tells you do how class-based views if we get to those. And this is how to do the include that we did earlier. So if you forget how to do some of these things, it's already written in. This thing we're going to do now with namespace is not, so follow along. All right, so we've already got those two imports. The first thing that we need to do is import the views from that app. Now that we've namespaced it, we've made the app, and we've got it all ready to go in those regards. We need to import it. So up here in our import statements, we're going to do from, and then the name of the app. So in our case, to do. Then we're going to say import. I'm going to say views. All right. Now this is going to be the name in every app you make. So views is going to come standard. You're always going to call it views. So this is another potential conflict. You don't want to just import views and stop there, like the way that we have with other things. There's another cool thing in Django, and kind of part of the reason I'm showing you this, or this is actually Python. It's a Python thing you can do, and there's other places you do this in Python. But you can import things and then give it a variable name. So import it as is what it's called. You say as, and then give it a name of some sort that you're going to be able to use and make sure that you're not conflicting with other things. So we're going to give it something descriptive, and we'll say the name of our app underscore views. That's also, again, fairly standard. So before I forget, I'm going to paste in our index and about views. That's annoying. See, now I've got a mix of double and single quotation marks. So I'm going to fix that just for consistency. That wouldn't break anything because they're not on different places, but it's going to annoy me. So we're going to fix that. And now we got doubles everywhere. All right. So now we have our index, we have our about, and we still have this include, just the regular to do URLs, right? So we should be set except that we have to do what? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, where did line 23 and 24 come from?
I cut these out of the to-do views or the
Oh,
to-do
okay,
URLs.
that's where they go. That's where
Yeah,
they go. Okay.
we wrote these in the to-do URLs. Now we're putting them up here,
Okay.
right? So because though these views, you see these references to index and about, they came from this to-do directory, right? And they were imported here as views, or they were imported there as views, but here they're imported as to-do views. So we just have to prepend this to-do underscore, this what we imported it as on these two views because they're still written there, right? So that's the last step we got to do is in this first path where it says views.index. We're going to change that to view to-do underscore views.index to match this up here on line 20. And this is the last thing we got to do for this part to make sure that it is properly namespaced on this URL. All right. Everybody with that so far? At least
kind of.
Okay, so the last thing we're going to do is we have to make a change in the base, in our navigation element, and how we reference these URLs now in our links. So anytime we change URLs or doing shifting in the back end, we have to make sure that our front end links, specifically in A tags usually, are pointing to the right places. So they reflect whatever changes we made back here. So because we've changed into using namespace, which again is going to be helpful when we start redirecting people, and we're going to be using our namespace URLs more when we do our create operation. We have to go into our navigation bar and change how we do our references to these URLs. Similarly, by adding the name of the application to do in front of the URLs that exist. Very simple, very small change that needs to be made. So to get there, going back to our top level My Site, the templates, top level templates folder, and we're looking for our base.html, the place where our navigation element, our navigation bar is. And so remember, we have our index, we have our about, we have our view tasks. Now, if we were to say reload with the changes we've made so far and try running this without changing this and putting this namespace in here, it's probably going to break our site because it's not going to be able to find some aspect of what we're looking for. So we get this error that says no reverse match at / and then it says reverse for view tasks not found. Now this error page right here is what is given to us because we have our what's that called? Debug set to true in our settings.py file. That's definitely not something you want to do when this is in production because this is absolutely a gold mine for anybody that wants to hack your site. But it's great for when you're developing, right? So if I scroll down a little bit, it shows me it says right here in template, and then it gives me the full directory to where I'm going and like where that template was. I can zoom in a little bit and see what's in here. So it says, there's my full directory. It says the base.html, it says error line 17. And then it gives me the error again. It says view task not found. And then it highlights line 17 in red and it shows me where I'm looking at, right? So it says this is wrong. It couldn't find this part. So this is what happens when we've updated the namespace. We forgot to update the URL end of it on our front end. So to fix this error, all we got to do is very simple. We just have to write the name of the app inside of this string. So inside the quotation marks where it says view-tasks, right before the word view, we're going to write to do and a colon. That's it. So the name of the app, colon, and the name of the view that you had before should solve that problem because now we've namespaced this URL and we're using that. This is what namespacing is doing. It's a way for us to reference these things using the name of the app. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to reload it. I'm going to see if that solves our problem. And if it did, we should be able just to see our site the way it was because this amounts to a refactoring. We didn't change anything except the backend functions. The front end should look the same. It should function the way it did before when I refresh this. So it hasn't broken yet, which is encouraging. So we still have our home page, looks good. About page works. And we have our to-do list, which shows, let me zoom out a little bit, what we expect it to. So here's the one task that we made in our admin panel. So we have our read function, and all we did was adjust our backend settings so that we have a namespace set up. So I know that's a little tricky as to why we did that, but I want to make sure everyone's clear. So do we have any questions? Because that is namespacing.
Mine's not so much related to putting together the base, but when going back to the error message,
Yeah.
being we have it set to true right now,
Mhm.
is that also I guess for a security purpose, right? We don't want people to hack our site.
Yeah.
When I'm doing this now, instead of removing some of the lines that you suggest that remove, I comment them out. So, but I know like if people were to inspect the site, they'll still see the more or less the same information.
Right. Yeah. As long as you have debug set that way,
Uh,
then information is being sent out that you don't want to be released.
okay.
Right. So again, like while you're developing, since we're developing kind of live on the internet,
Mhm.
a very good idea, and I mentioned this before, I'm just going to reiterate though as we do this, that back in our web tab, I'm just going to open this in a new tab. If you scroll down towards the bottom of the web tab, there's a way you can set a username and password here
Mhm.
and enable security so people can't just go to your site, and it'll prevent, while you're doing it under construction in Python anywhere, because it is technically live internet and anyone can access it. And there are definitely people out there that have bots searching for like brand new sites that pop up so they can do whatever they do. This is a good idea, right? I'm not doing it here because I don't have to log in every single time I go to the site, but
Right.
it'll prevent that sort of thing to where you can have debug set to true, but have some level of security.
Okay. So for best practices, in the HTML file, don't comment out the line, just delete it, essentially,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that it shouldn't. like for that to be an issue, really, they'd have to be able to get into the source code and change it to be able to get it to spit out the error, probably. But again, I mean, somebody that's really determined is going to find a way in.
Yeah.
I don't think commenting is going to be a particular security breach, like bad, poor practice or anything like that, to answer
Okay.
your question.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Good questions. Any other questions about namespace? Why mostly that we set this up? I mean, we're going to do a little bit more here in a second, but everyone clear kind of conceptually on why we did that. All right, cool. Question pops up as we go. Keep it to yourself. No, I'm joking. Please, out with it, and we will dive in. Plenty of time to ask questions and answer questions. So, all right, next thing we're going to do is we're going to start building our actual CRUD operation. Okay, so our create operation is going to have several steps, and one of the things that is a little bit confusing about this, arguably, is that we're going to make something about 3-4 different times called form. We're making one form, right? There's one form we are making. It's going to be the form to create a to-do item based on the model that we made, right? So let's, if we recall, down in our to-do models.py, we defined our model with the title, due date, and status. So those are the fields that are available to us. Remember, we call them fields. These are, we think of them as the columns in our table because the table is called task. And this is a relational database. We have a task table that has columns title, due, and status. And today we are going to make a form that takes these fields and shows these fields to the user, and users can fill in information for these fields, right? So we're going to have text input for title and due date, but there will be some date restrictions on this. It'll only accept a date. And then there should be a drop down for status with our two or whatever, however many choices we put in here. We could add more choices if we like and expand it. So that's what we're going for today. Whenever we do form, we're doing it a couple places. We're doing some ways that may be confusing. And again, ask questions if you're confused about why we're doing it that way. But keep in mind, this is the form we're doing. We're going to refer to this model. We're going to make a form that users can interact with and make a to-do item, a task. All right, so if no questions, we're going to navigate back up to the to-do directory. So we're just in the my site to-do directory. I've been normally, we've been creating things in the command line when we have directories and several things to create because that just feels a lot faster to me. We're just going to make a single file this time. So I'm going to do it right here in the GUI. And I'm just going to do a forms.py. So forms, plural, .py is the convention. And when I hit enter on this, it's going to take me straight into my text editor. Now, the reason I'm doing this separately, right? The reason I'm doing this in another file is similar to the reason that we did the JavaScript file separately and the CSS file separately. Even though we had very little CSS, very little JavaScript, at the size of the project we're doing, this does not need to be a standalone form file, right? This could be, we could write this form and define this form in our view directly because it's such a small project. But the idea here is that just like the other things, this is built for scale. And I want to show you common patterns that people use. This is very common to have a forms.py file that's separate. And you can build in custom logic. You can have several forms in here. It can get very large and very complex depending on the project. So this is a really common thing to do. Even though in our project, it's going to be a very small, incredibly short form. We're not going to do custom logic doing the crazy with it. Just kind of show you the mechanics of where it goes, right? So that's why we're doing this in a separate file, but we're going to go straight to that instead of doing the refactoring steps that we did with JavaScript or CSS when we wrote it in our HTML file and then moved it over. We're just going to make it into the file, the forms.py file directly. Okay, so we're starting on this blank page. First thing we got to do is import some things. So we're going to import from Django some forms that are built in. We're going to use some functionality that are in those forms, those classes that exist. And we're also going to import the task model that we made. So from Django, lowercase, all lowercase, we're going to import, and then it's just called forms, again, lowercase. And then from dot, which refers to the directory that we're in, so the top level directory that of this area, which is to do, is dot, right? And that's a Linux standard that refers to the directory you're in. So it's dot models, spelled the way models is spelled. Then we're going to import the model by name that we want to do. So we've done this before. We could import with an asterisk, get everything, but that creates a possibility of conflict, which we're trying to avoid generally. So be explicit, name the model. And then we're going to define our form. Okay, so this is where we're building. The first time we're going to be building a form. And what this is doing is going to use a class, a Python class, to inherit these attributes from the parent class and give us ways to do some things automatically without having to be super explicit about it. So we do it the way we've done any Python class with the word class, lowercase, and then we define or give it a name that whatever name we want. By convention, it starts with a capital letter and is cased with if it's 2 words, second word is also capitalized. So we're going to do a task form. That's also convention. We do similar to the name of the model that we're going to use, and then just put form at the end. So task form, follow these conventions, and we don't have to look things up later because we know what they're called. And this is going to inherit explicitly from the forms that we imported up here in row 1. So forms.model form. And that particular form that's built into Django, close this off with a colon because it's a class definition. So this model form is going to give us the ability to interact with our models, with our task model in this case. But it's going to have some things that are specifically built around grabbing information out of a model, using the fields that we defined, setting them up the way they want to as a form, right? So it's going to shortcut a lot of us having to do that. So the next step here is using another built-in class within a class. So remember when I said that pretty much every data type in Python can be nested within itself. We'd have lists within lists, dictionaries within dictionaries. Can't really have variables within variables. I guess you could. But classes within classes. This is the first time we're going to see anything like that. So we're going to define on row 6 another class on line 6. So I put a colon and then I've 4 spaces over because Python expects that an indented block, as that's called. And we're going to define another class called meta, capitalized. This meta class is just built in to Django. And this is, again, something that's useful in handling these forms, handling these and connecting them with models through HTTP, the way that this is being done in Django. This is the beauty of the Django backend framework, is these things that are doing under the hood are somewhat transparent to us. You're welcome to look it up, but it makes a lot of this a lot faster. So the last thing we have to do here is very simply tell it, well, not the last, I'm sorry. Next thing we have to do is tell it which model we want to use. So we give it the attribute model, which is going to expect this meta class has a model attribute that it expects and requires. And you have to tell what model you want to use. So our case is task. So we say model is task. And then we have to say which fields we want to grab out of that model. So another expected attribute is fields. And we set that the way we set everything with the is operator. That looks like an equal sign normally, not equals. And then we put in a list of strings. And the strings are going to be the field names that we want to grab. So they have to be spelled exactly the same way as they're spelled on our model in models.py. So title, do, and status as strings in a list. And there we go. So this is how we're going to go to the model and grab these fields and say, all right, cool, build a form that has these fields from a model and is ready to get information and put it into that model. And that's it. Cool. So we're going to save this. Are we tracking so far?
Yeah, I think so.
Good. Any big questions yet? All right, we can come back here and look at this if we need to. But we're going to move away from it now because this is all we need to write in our forms.py. We've defined our form, and now we start using it places. So let's go through the same steps that we go through every time that I've mentioned, that we define our view, map our URL, go hook up a template, write a template if we don't have one, connect to one if we do. This time we don't have a template, so we're going to have to write a fresh template. So I want to make sure that we, again, get through all those things and talk about what pieces we do. So let's go over to our to-do views.py. So just up to to-do and views.py. And let's get rolling. All right, so we already have our render import. We've done this already where we rendered our things, our get requests as these are. So we didn't write get anywhere, but keep in mind all 3 of these are get requests. So we have gotten information from here, gotten templates, and we just put them on the page. We've got our tasks, we put them on the page, and that's it. All right, now we're going to do some other things. So like I mentioned before, we're going to need to redirect users after they submit the form to someplace else. We don't want them to just to sit there and look at the form. We want them to go someplace. And they're not going to go to the server because there's nothing to look at there. So we have to redirect them somewhere. The information is going to go to the server and the user is going to be put to another page, right? For us to be able to do that from this same package, the Django.shortcuts up here on line 1 where it says from Django.shortcuts import render, we're going to add with a comma another thing to import after render. We're going to import redirect. So we do so the top line, it did everything up to render. We had a comma redirect. You can do this with any packages. You import multiple things, just doing comma separations. And then the other thing that we need to do to use the namespace that we set up, which is again fundamental here, it's going to be very helpful, is from a different package. We're going to do Django from Django.urls import reverse. So that's going to allow us to, again, look up. Remember when we broke our app earlier by not namespacing the A tag, it said no reverse found. This is what's going to allow us to write in here our namespaces, and it'll reverse look things up the way that we wanted to. All right, so the last thing we need to do is we made that task form, so we need to get that in here similarly to the way that we did our task model when we did our view tasks up here, right? So we have to import that. Same fashion, it's in the same directory. So we start with the dot, but it's called forms. Remember, because we did the forms.py, so we don't have to do the .py part. We just do the name of the file. So .forms import, then the name of our class that we defined, task form. And again, since I follow the conventions, I know I don't have to go look anything up. I use the name of the model and then just put form after it. Nice and simple. Okay, so now we've imported the things we need to import. We have our task form that we define in a separate file, which again, we could have just written that class here. We could have just written our task form right here. But, if it was a bigger project, that's the idea. We just put it in a different form, and this is how you would hook it up. These are the packages that we're going to need. We're going to do reverse and the redirect from the shortcuts that we already had. So now let's define that view. So first, we're going to go down underneath our view tasks and do the same way we have. We're going to do functional views again. All these things, again, can be done with classes, and maybe we'll get to that later in this course. But let's start out by defining the way we have numerous times a function with def space, and then we're going to do create task. And just like we have before, again, remember, this takes in a request. So the request has to come in, just like it always does, from a user. In our case, it's a person on a computer with a browser. I'm going to make some space here so it's moved up on the screen a little bit, hopefully a little bit easier to read. All right, so the first thing we need to do is figure out what kind of method this request is. So method is referring to those things that we looked at on the slide with the post, get, and all those sorts of things. We didn't have to check for methods because the default method of requests is generally get. That's kind of what it starts with. So if we just go with that, that's what it's doing most of the time, and we'll rock with it. But here we have to check because it might have what's called post information. So what we want to do is an if statement from Python. So if, and we just do request dot, and that's how you get anything out of the request. So if you want to get like users and things like that, Cody, you were talking about how to set up, some control last time on how users access certain things. The request will have the user information. So you do request.user to, once you have a login set up, this is how you get the user out of that and be able to do things in your views with it. So request, but this time we're going to do request.method.
I remember that. I was just thinking that right now. I was like,
yeah,
oh.
we talked about this. Yeah, exactly. So this same way, we're going to do request.method to grab out of that request what the method is, find out what it is, and we're going to use our equivalence operator, right? Say is equal to, like if it's equal to, and then we're going to give that post, right? So we want to see if it's a post request. So basically asking, does this request have data that wants to be saved on the server, that the user wants to save and submit to the server, right? That's what a post request is. It's a creating a record. So we're checking for that. So we're going to give our first few lines of code here, in the case that it is a post request. So we are handling a form that has been submitted. Imagine this, like a user comes to our site, they put in the name of the task, the due date, and the status of it. It'll default to do, but they can do whatever they like. And they've hit submit, basically. And so this is the behavior that's going to happen when that post request comes and it has some stuff in it. So the first thing we have to do is we're going to define a variable called form. All right, so this is the form that is submitted, and it's going to be the task form that we imported, that we created, so that we know which model we're using, which field we're using out of the model, and all those sorts of things. And we're going to instantiate that the way we have any other class with the parentheses. And inside this instantiation of our class, when we do an instance of our class, just like we did with our car classes before, when we talked about classes generally, we're going to pass it some beginning information. So we're going to pass it the post information from the request. So we do that is request dot capital POST, not a string. So this is all just lowercase request dot, and then post is how you reference the actual post information from it. So this row 24 is checking the method of the request to see what kind it is. And if it's a post method, then we're setting this variable form to our task form and giving it the information that is in the post request. All right, the next thing we got to do is we got to check to see if the information in this form that was submitted is valid. There's a built-in way to do that, and it's conveniently called is valid. So I just hit enter, no colon at the end of this because it's not a new function or anything like that. But I am going to put another if conditional statement nested inside here. So I'm the same indentation level as our form definition. So I'm 2 indentations over, right? Whatever you're doing, tabs or spaces. If it's spaces, it's 8 spaces. If it's tabs, 2 tabs. Keep it consistent. If you just hit enter on here, it's going to do that automatically for you. But right here, I'm going to define another if conditional control structure, right? So we form dot is valid, and this is a built-in method in all forms. So when we imported our form from Django, they all have this is valid thing, and we instantiated our class here as named forms. This is what we're referencing is our variable name form, which is an instance of our task form class that we defined in forms.py. All right, so is valid is going to do some stuff. Pretty cool what it does. I'm not going to go into it again. We're just leveraging the abilities that Django has built in, and this is one of them. So it's going to check that it's valid. It's going to see if there's any problems with it. And if it is, so again, we put our colon here and we hit enter, and we are now 3 indentations over. So we're indented for a 3rd time. And we're going to do form.save, another built-in method. It's just going to save the information in the form. So pretty self-explanatory. Now, since this is the case where it had post information, the information in that form was valid, we saved that form to our server, and we're ready to go. So we've committed it to the database. That's what this save is a committing to the database. There's a way to tell it not to commit and do some changes in here, but that's kind of next level stuff. This is just a quick, we're assuming it's good. We don't want to do any changes, don't want to do any logic. Save it. We need to send the server, we need to send the user somewhere, right? So now we're going to do our reverse that we imported from before. So just like always, we need to put into a return statement because this is a function. These are functional views. So our return statement is like we have before, whenever redirect. But this time we're going to include reverse. So we do redirect, open parentheses, and then reverse. Then another open parentheses. So this is inside of it. So we're going to define inside of the second open parentheses where we want this to go. And we're going to use our namespaced URLs. And we're going to send them back to our view tasks view. 2 close parentheses. Close it off because the first close parentheses is for reverse. Closes this off. And use our namespace URL in the second parentheses for redirect. Cool. All right, so this is how we're going to handle in our view when somebody submits a form that has information that is valid information, and we're going to save that information to our database, and then we're going to redirect them here on the line 28 back to our main view. So what's going to happen is they're going to go to a page that has a blank form where they can put their information in, and then once they hit save on that or submit on that, it'll take them back to the full list, and they should see that created thing on the list. That's the concept here. So what we've got to do is put in the other scenario, if it's not a post request. So our else scenario from this top row 24. So that means we've got to back it up to 1 indentation in and put our else statement here, right? So make sure you don't put it underneath this one. This is not checking to do other things if the form is valid. We don't have an else statement for that. If the form is invalid, it's just going to skip it. It's going to be like, nope, not valid. So this is else for our method check. So basically the else condition here is assumed to be a get, right? So it's kind of like the first time someone comes here, we get the information from the server. There's nothing in there to post. It's not a post request. But similarly, we're going to have to give a form from our class, our task form, but there's no information to pass to it this time. So we don't have to do the request.post inside of it. It's just a blank form, right? So we're instantiating a blank form and we're saying, all right, cool. So make us a form and the user's going to fill this out. And then from there, we're going to follow the same patterns that we followed above here, where we passed a context dictionary with whatever we wanted the users to be able to see and interact with when we did our read operation, and we did our render with the request and where we want to render to. Really the same thing. We're going to follow exactly the same pattern here because this is just like the read that we did before. This is a get request, right? So it's getting the information, in this case, a blank form, right? So we're going to do context. This is convention to call it context because, once again, it is the information that comes with the request. So it is context. And we're going to say the key value pair. So the key is going to be the string form. And the value is going to be our form variable that we made up here. That is the instance of our class, task form class. And then underneath that context dictionary, we're going to, I'm going to back this up so I know where it is. We're going to put our return statement and we're going to do render. We have before. And we're going to render our request, our to do create task.html. And again, we haven't made this yet, but this is the template. This is the same pattern we followed before. We did our read operation, was we tell it which template we're going to load. We'll go make the template here soon. And then that context thing that we made. And there we go. So now we have made our create view. This is our fully formed, ready to roll create view. I'm going to save this. And we can move on to our next step, which is, who remembers? After we do a view, what's the next step always? Where do we go? Views.
We do a URL.
URL. Very good. So we map our URL. So we go to do urls.py. Let's map our URL, right? So since we're in the application, this is an application specific URL, we're going to map it the way we did our view tasks. We're going to do create tasks here. We could put it at the top to keep it in order of CRUD, but we'll just add a new one underneath. That's okay. So path. Why am I trying to write this to Patty? I don't know who Patty is. Okay, so path. And then we can name this whatever we like. So we say tasks new or task new or whatever you like. I'm going to say tasks new. And then this is from views. Again, we're in the same thing. We're not referencing from the top level. So we're just referencing our views. So we do views. And then we follow the convention. So we know that we want to create task. So create _ task. And then we give it a name, which again, following convention, we know is going to be create task. Since we're only creating one task, not viewing several tasks, this is single. So create task, trailing comma, which isn't required. But again, as we add these things, that'll keep us from forgetting and breaking something. And now we've mapped our URL. So that's it. So let's save that. So we go follow the same pattern, give it some sort of name, reference which view we want to use, and then give this, I'm sorry, this is the URL, not a name, sorry. And then this is the name of the actual thing that how we reference it, the name of the URL, the name of the path. So let's go make a template. This is going to be a handful of things to keep track of and write some HTML again. But we'll be able to use this for our update template as well. So we'll write this once, bit of a pain, but it's very good to know what's going on here and very good to go through these steps. So let's do that. And we're going to do this in our to-do templates. So we go into our to-do directory, our templates, and to-do again. Remember, it's redundantly named to-do in here, so that keeps the conflicts from happening. So we should be alongside our view tasks HTML. So in the same place there, we're going to create a new file here. And again, I'm just going to do it in the GUI so we know where we're at. So create task.html. Again, we've already called that out as the name that we're going to use. So let's not go switching it up on ourselves now, breaking things. All right, so I'm in the my site to do templates to do create task.html file. And we're going to do what we've done every time to get going. Again, this should be something that becomes habit is we start off by doing our extends call using Django's front end template language. with the parentheses percentage sign. I'm going to close that off before I forget. So the word extends. And then we say base.html as a string for what to extend, what template we use to extend. And then we need to tell it a block, which is a reserved word in Django. And remember, we named our block content, which was an arbitrary name. Could have been anything. But this is what's going to go into the center of our base.html. And before we move on, so we don't forget, we will end the block. So you have to be explicit in Django and end the block. So this is how we start all of our templates all of the time. We're starting a new template. All right, so from here is going to be some HTML with a little bit of Django's front-end language to get some of these things done. Or template language, I'm sorry, not front-end language. I keep saying front-end when I mean template. Let's do some HTML, some real basic stuff. So we're going to do a header, just an H3 that says new tasks. This is going to go above our form that says what form it is we're doing. Say, hey, like we're going to create a new task. You call us whatever you like. Say create a new task. And then underneath that, we're going to use the HTML form tag. So I'm going to close it and hit enter, but I'm going to add a class to it real quick. So in class equals, and we're going to tell it that we want it to be a post dash form, right? So it's going to be handling post information. And then another thing by convention that we like to add here is called action equals an open blank string. And this isn't actually required in newer browsers and doing things in HTML, but it's very good to include just in case someone's using something old and it'll prevent breaking and stuff like that. So it's a nice thing to add, even though it's not really required. You can look into what it's doing. I'm not going to explain it really deeply right now, but it's kind of by convention that we added in there again. So folks that have older browsers don't break. But if you don't put action, it's not going to ruin anything. So you can skip that. And the last thing we want to do is explicitly tell it what sort of method to expect here. So we already told it was a form, a post form in the class that's going to give it some, it's going to look for certain things. It's going to do certain things. But we're going to explicitly tell it the method is going to be post. All caps again. All right. Now inside this tag. So now I've gone down to row 7, or line 7. I'm going to start writing the actual form itself. So this is going to be the form on the page. And again, I know this is kind of like the third time we've made a form, but this is the same form. This is what's going to be rendered out on the page. So we're going to use some Django stuff here to help us out. The first thing that we're going to do is very, very, very important to remember. So I'm going to open up and close the Django template tag with the curly brackets and the percentage signs. And then inside, I'm going to use a built-in token called a CSRF underscore token. And this is a security measure. So it's cross-site request forgery token. And a cross-site request forgery is a really common attack that people try to forge and pretend that they're a legit thing and then come in and access information that they shouldn't, right? And they use these forms to do it. So it's very common if you're writing a form for people to exploit those forms with a cross-site reference attack. So this token built into Django prevents that from happening. Don't forget to use it on your forms. It doesn't take a closing tag. It's just a single line, CSRF underscore token. Very important. All right. Now, underneath that, what we're going to do is basically go through similarly to what we set up in our the view to the view tasks, where we looked into the database. We sent out all the things in the tasks dictionary. We looped through that dictionary and set all the things out there. We'll do something very similar, right? So remember, we made the form dictionary, the form, it's a class really, but we made the form in the context dictionary. That's the dictionary I'm referring to. So we have access to that here. So we're going to loop through it the way we did before. We're going to use a for loop. So Django's opening tags, then for field, which again, this could be an arbitrary name, just like any Python for loop. So you say for field in, and then we say form, which we know is the name of the object that we passed in the context. So that's not arbitrary. We already set that in the view. Now, because Django takes the end form, we go ahead and do that before we move on. So I'm going to do my end for tag. And then inside of the for loop, what's going to happen is I want to give this thing basically a set of HTML things similarly to what we did before in the task, the view tasks. a set of HTML commands that we want to give for each form field that's in our form, right? So it's going to be the title, status, and due date are going to be in there. We're just going to wrap this in a simple div tag like we did before. So it's got some kind of space on it. Inside that div tag, we're going to make a paragraph, right? So it's just text that's inside of this. And then we're going to use Django's front end or front end template language tags, the double curly brackets, open and closing double curly brackets, to reference the field itself that we want to grab. So this is a similar pattern that we did before inside the for loop. We use the double curly brackets to reference the thing that we want to grab. And so we want to grab the field, which is the name we used up here, right? So we're going for field in the form. So each field. And we want the label from that field. All form fields will have a label, and that's just the name that you put in. So title is going to be title, status is going to be status, all that kind of stuff, right? And we'll put a colon after it. This is just a text thing to make it look like this. It's not Django or anything like that. Then we'll put a BR tag, which is just break. So it's going to go down to a new line on the HTML page. Doesn't have to go to a new line here. It doesn't matter if it goes a new line here. This break will make it be a new line on the browser when it renders. And then I'm going to put the actual field itself with curly brackets, not square brackets. What am I doing? Double curly brackets again. And then we do just field. So there's the actual field, right? So that, again, in the case of title, it's just going to be a blank place for the user to write the title. So the top is going to say title. There's going to be a colon. And then on the next line underneath it, it's going to be a big square, big rectangle for you to write the title in. That's what this is going to look like. And that's what this piece of code right here is doing in this paragraph. All right. Any questions about that yet? I know we kind of hustled through that stuff. I want to make sure we understand what we've done thus far before we move on and do a little bit more with this. This is the basic functionality we need to get through so far. Any questions?
Are these Django templates based on Pebble?
I don't know, actually. I don't know what Pebble is. I don't think so.
It's a templating language.
No, I think this. So all these things, or what you're talking about, this front end language, that's talking the template language.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's called. I know this one. It's not Pebble. It is. Oh man, it's like on the tip of my tongue. I want to say it's like Jasmine or something like that, but it's not Pebble. I know.
Okay.
So yeah, now I know what you mean. It is yes, based on something else. There is something that's very very similar to this. That has something. I can't remember.
Because I've been doing a lot of script writing over in WebEx Contact Center, and it uses Pebble for its templating,
and it looks like this.
It is it's this.
Yeah. Well,
if I want to do an if statement, I got the curly bracket %, if, and I run through the end if.
I suspect they're based on the same thing. It's probably very similar. Yeah, and Pebble might be the root to it. Like it might be based on Pebble, but I've heard it referred to as, again, I can't remember the name. I'll have to look that up and get back to you. But yeah.
That was just a curiosity question.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Any other questions again before we add some more stuff to this? All right, cool. So this is going to present us with those form fields, right? So it should have our status, it should have our due date, and then it should have our title, due date, then status, in the order that we put them in the model. And now what we want to do is set up a way for it to handle any errors that might happen. And Django's got some stuff built in for that. So we just got to kind of tell it what to do, which is really nice. So we're going to do a for loop inside of this. So like underneath the paragraph tag, directly underneath our paragraph tag, we're going to do the Django template tags and do another for loop. So I'm going to open and close this right now just so I don't forget. And so we're going to say for error in field dot errors, right? So again, the reason we're doing this inside our outer for loop is because we're still using the same thing, the same object from the form dictionary that we passed in the view, right? So each error that's in the field that we're on right now, right? So if somebody puts bad date or something like that, I'm going to go ahead and close up this for loop again so I do not forget our end for. So easy to forget when you're thinking about your logic. All right, so this is going to tell it what to do if there's an error, and we just wanted to throw up some text on the screen in red that says, hey, don't, that's wrong, right? So we're going to use this small tag, which may sound insulting, but don't worry about it. Computers don't have feelings. Then we're going to set a style directly in here the way we've done before. So we're going to use style tag. Then inside our string. We're going to do color and just set it to red. All right, so this is just going to set up our red something. And so inside the small tag, so inside the actual tag itself, when I close it off with a bracket, the text editor gave me the closing tag. So inside, we're going to similarly to what we've done before, use our double curly brackets and put in, again, so we're doing for error in the field errors, right? So there's going to be a whole bunch of errors in the field errors. We're going to grab each one. And this error is what we want to print. So we're just going to type the word error. Error. And there you go. So this is going to come out in red. That's the idea here, is it's going to say, okay, we want you to say there's an error and spit it out if there is. Cool. That is the basic parts of our form insofar as the fields, the entry form fields that you're going to put in that users are going to interact with. So the last pieces that we need to add here are some control buttons, right? So we got to have a way to submit it. We should have a way to clear off the whatever somebody entered if they would say, oh, now I want to change that. So a little reset button, and then a way to cancel entirely and go back to our view that we were at before, our view tasks, the way we were. So the way that we're going to do the submit and reset button is going to use built-in buttons in HTML. And then to get back, since we're using URLs and redirecting and doing those things, we'll do an A tag for our cancel button. So it'll be just like a link that we've done before. The first two buttons will be a little bit different, but they'll be the same as each other. So we're going to use button tags, HTML button tags, and we'll tell it the type. We'll set the type. The first one to submit, which again is a built-in button type. It's going to take the information that's in there and it's going to submit it with the form. So it's going to send it back through the process and through some HTML magic, and we'll let it go how it does. And this is just the text to display in the tags. We're going to say submit. So the button itself is going to pop up with submit. And it'll be self-explanatory what that does. Similarly, button spelled the same way twice. This time we're going to be doing our reset button. Same thing, put in the text. All right, so we put our submit buttons, our reset button. And then let's add a cancel button. So same as we've done several times.
Are those distinctive objects?
These right here?
Reset and submit?
Yeah. Yeah. So these are their own buttons.
Those are Django objects, right?
Nope, these are HTML. This is just HTML stuff. There's nothing Django about these at all. So there's all, like, if you look at this is all pure HTML right there.
Okay.
Because forms and submitting and stuff like that is a real typical use case for HTML. So it's already existed. And as you recall, we're using it in HTML form itself. The only stuff we're really doing from Django is we're like, some security stuff. We're looping through the form that we made. We're checking for errors. But all the rest of this form is just HTML. So even the controls are HTML as well.
Okay.
Cool. Good question, though. So similarly, our navigation controls are also going to be URL, but then, or I'm sorry, URL. Of course, it's going to be URLs. But our navigation controls are going to be HTML, but then we're going to map our URL using Django because that's how we've been mapping our URLs, right? So we're going to do this in the same way that we had before with our A tags. So it's going to A and then href for the hyperlink reference. And we're going to set that to the Django URL tag, close it, and then the single string, and we're going to use the namespaced URLs for view tasks. Close off as a string. And then in this button, close off our A tag, put cancel. Okay. Now, what is the next step? Once we've now done our view, we mapped our URL, and we've created our template that we're going to point to. So let me save this. We've done template. What's the last thing that we need to do out of the kind of general 4 things that we always have to do?
I only knew about 3.
All right. Your stunned silence is very reassuring.
Add navigation.
The view, the URL.
Yes, Cody got it. Add navigation.
Okay.
Add navigation. So we have to be able to get to this. We've created all this stuff. We created this form. So now if you picture, again, since we haven't reloaded any of this, our site, we have to put something on here that'll let us add a task, right? So we need some kind of button or something. So what I'm gonna do is just add a little button down here that says, add a task that we can click, and it should take us to that new form that we just made. And we'll have a look at that form. So let's save this. And we will go to wait, actually, where are we gonna go? Since we're adding navigation to this, and I just told you what we're gonna make, which place do we need to go from here?
Image,
Image? No.
create image or something?
Nope.
URLs, Pi.
No.
You got to put a route in, right?
Nope. We already put the route in. We're adding navigation. So it's got to be.
Okay. So then a template, HTML, well, we've already got the form.
You got the form. You're in the right track.
You get the form view and the template all together with the route gets you where you want to go. So.
But the route comes from where? Like, where did the navigation go?
The view task.
View tasks. Yes. So this page that we're looking at is the view task page, right? This is our to-do URL, takes us to the view tasks. So we have to add it to that template. Why do I keep going to this web tab? Get this out of my face. Okay, so we have to go to that template in our to-do templates, right? So it's just one level up from where we're at. Our view tasks.html. This is where we have our table that's got, again, we pull out each task and list it on there, each one that exists. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a way to add a new task, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to put this in here underneath our end if. So we're inside our outer div class. We'll make some space right here for row 26 for me. But our outer div is this whole table. So we want it inside the table. We want it inside this div, but we don't necessarily want it in the table, right? So we want it outside the table, but inside the div, right? So after our end if, where it says no tasks found, so we want a little bit of space down here, and then we want a button to say, all right, cool. So add a task, whether there are tasks or not, right? So that's why we don't want to put it in the table. We don't want it to like not be there if there are no tasks. We want to be able to add tasks if there are no tasks. So in its own div that we're going to set as class row. So we're going to set another row on the page that's going to be separate. So we visualize this. There's one div here that's got this table in it, and we're basically making another row underneath it down here, right? So if I inspect this page, visually, this top part is one row. See this div container right here? So we're going to put another row in here underneath. That's going to have its own container, and then we're going to put the button inside that container. Right, so that's what we're doing here. So that's what this row is, right? So inside of that row, we're going to put another container. So div class container. Close that up. All right, cool. So we're inside these two divs. Got a row, got a container. That'll just kind of help make it look fairly nice. And then all we got to do is put an A tag that's going to go to that URL, right? So basically, we just got to navigate to our form that we made. So we're going to give it a class to make it look like a button from our front end framework, the very, very old but somewhat relevant, much like myself, Bootstrap. We're going to do button and then button primary. So it's going to be like a blue button thing down there and draw your attention to it. And we just have to set our href like we have every other time with an A tag. So we do href, set to the string, which has Django, template tags in there, referencing a URL. And then I'm going to put the string in here. And what URL do we want to refer this to? Cody, you're on mute. You're waving your hand. I can see you thinking.
The file that we were working on previously.
Yeah, the file we were working on, which is what? Yeah. So again, remember the conventions, and if we name it by convention, we should be able to just think it's descriptive. It was what? So we put in the namespace first, right? Because it's in our to-do app.
Yeah.
And we are create task.
A task.
There we go. All right. Good job.
I just like it when somebody answers the answer after you answered it.
You know, you almost had it. You were so close. All right. There we go. Cool. So we set the URL to our namespace create task that we just created. So we know that that's going to, in the view, when people go there the first time, it's going to be a GET request. And so it's going to give them the blank form. And then once they give it information, it'll be post request. It'll do all the things we told it to do in the view. So I put it inside the tag add task. That's the text that's actually shown. And then that should be it. We should be pretty good here. I don't know. Maybe I got too many divs going on. But that's right. Let's see. Maybe I put these all in the wrong place. But we're going to save it and see how it runs. So right now, this should be the last thing that we need to do to get our create running, right? So let's save this. Let's reload. Let's see. I may have, outthought myself here with the div placements. See if things look totally janky. We might have to move stuff around. But so I saved, I reloaded the stuff on the server side. I'm going to refresh the browser side. And there we go. So we got our add task button. So it popped up. Doesn't look terrible. So whatever I did with the divs maybe worked. Then we hit add task to see if it actually functions the way we want it to. And so there we go. So it takes us to our new task form. And here is the form the way it is supposed to look. So we have our title, colon. Remember, this is the thing we did the double curly brackets and we got the field and then, or the field label. And then we put that colon in there. So this is what I put after it just in text. I could have put anything in there or left it alone. And then this is the actual title field itself, waiting for me to put something in. So say new task. And this is the due date. So it's already got some stuff in here because I've done this a bunch of times and, browsers do what they do. But let's set a due date. And you notice like when we did this on our admin panel, when we click inside of it, there's a sexy little, date picker thing. That doesn't exist here. You got to put this in. You got to write it in. And it's somewhat picky on the format. Like you can't just put any format you want in here. But it does take a fair amount of leeway. We found this out actually when we were messing around with the last class. You can type in different formats, but we can mess around with it here in a second. So let's do the first test. We're going to test this kind of manually, is to see that it works the way we expect it to, right? So we got here, we navigated here, but we can't say we're done yet. We can't say we know that this works the way we want it to because we have to be able to reset and submit, cancel, and do all the things that we want to do with these buttons. So while we're here, let's just test reset first and should just clear everything off and not do anything other than that. So if that works properly, we can count that as done. So we reset. Cool. That works. We can also check our cancel. Goes back. Great. It didn't make a task. All right. So now let's make a real task, right? So let's actually save this one. So now we know that our GET request works. We know that we can interact with this thing. Let's pick a due date that's already here. This works. We already tested our reset and cancel. Let's hit submit and see what happens. And it works. So now we have our new task set to the date that I picked and the status that I set it to. So we could add more tasks if we want to. And we could say, see if that works. And it does. You see it reformatted to match all these things, even though I put the dates in differently. So a lot of stuff is sort of like automatic behavior. So what other tests could we do here manually real quick? We could see what happens if we put bad information in, right? Like what happens if we try to submit with nothing? It says, okay, fill out the title field. All right. So see if it takes an empty date. Nope, it doesn't. So let's see if it takes not a date. Oh, broke. And this is why we test. So this returned none instead. Interesting. So where do you think we would go to fix this problem?
Is there any way you can program a variety of date formats?
Yeah, there are. But what is this telling us? So it didn't give us an HTTP response, right? So what do we think? What do you think might have gone wrong? What do we expect it to actually? Let's start with that. What do we expect the behavior to be? I'm just going to go back here. What do we think was going to happen when I put in something that we knew was wrong? So this is wrong.
Well, it's going to throw some kind of error. It's like there's like unacceptable format or something like that.
It was expecting numerals or numbers instead of characters.
Sure, sure. That's kind of what caused the error. But what did we expect as behavior when I put in bad data? What do we think was going to happen?
It would raise some
Oh,
kind of objection, some kind of exception error, say a flag that says this is bad data.
Right. And where do we set that? We set that in the little error loop, right? And we check the errors in the
Yeah,
form.
yeah, okay.
Okay. Think that might be
Yeah,
it?
because that's all happening when you're submitting the form. So underneath the form, you would have to have something that is saying that if this is not a date, throw an exception to say, hey, try again.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. So I gotta say, I don't know. This isn't a planned task. I'm not sure why this happened. So we'd have to look in here and figure out why this is not giving us the error that we wanted to. And saying that it didn't return an HTTP response, which makes me think that we possibly missed something. Again, I'm assuming it's happening somewhere in the error handling, right? Because the blank, that's submitted just fine. So where do you think we should start looking to make sure that we got it right? Again, the error we call the error at what point? Where do we tell it to give us the error?
Well, it would
Where
be
do
on the submission of that form. When you
Mhm.
Yeah,
hit the button, it now has that form it has to render.
Yeah.
And you were testing to see if the form was valid, so that form was failing the validity check at that point, right?
Yep. See, it fails when I put in some sort of string information.
Sure.
All right. So where do you think we should look and we run into this problem? Where do you think the file or which file do you think is probably broken or most likely broken if we get this kind of error? Where's our first place to look?
create task,
Create task what?
.html. Well, that one.
Okay. So you think it's the front end template in the create task where we made the form?
Yes.
Okay. No, I'm not telling you wrong. I'm just like making sure that I understand what you chose. All right. So why I'm gonna go to that. Why do you think it's in create tasks? While I go
Um,
to it.
I think Chris was saying as far as the error in the for loop, right? Error
Yeah.
in fields dot errors. There should be a red, but we didn't see anything red appear, did we?
True. True. Okay. That's a logical place
Because
to look.
I think all the HTML is doing is presenting you with stuff, and any of the
Right.
logic is going to occur on the forms.py
Yeah.
where
Right.
you're defining your methods.
Okay.
So
Okay.
this is going to submit that form, and a method has to take that form in, and then we're not doing anything, but that would be our opportunity to add some logic or error checking on it, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
For field in form, field label,
Mm-hmm.
the labels would be the title, due date, and status, correct?
Right. And so those didn't break when we came back here. If I just backtrack, so that stuff all loaded properly. So nothing broke there.
Mhm.
So I run this again. Let's see if we maybe get some more hints. Right. So what does
Would
it
it
say
be
right
the
here?
base file?
Was that?
Would it be the base file?
No, not the base file.
So
Look at
under
the error.
create task and views,
Yeah. Look at this part I highlighted in the error itself. What is this saying right here?
The view to do
The
dot.
view. Right.
Would it be the view file?
Probably in the views. Yeah.
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 Let's
So
see.
that's the place I would start looking because it references specifically said, hey, the view. And anytime we're talking about returning an HTTP response object, right? So that all that stuff is done in a view. So this makes me think that something possibly is wrong in our view. So let's go look. So we go to to do views.py. And let's see if there's anything in here
Yeah,
jumping out of us that we forgot. What's up?
we don't have an error in there, right? For
There shouldn't be. No, it's all built into the tasks. So we checked that the form is valid. Save, redirect. And we know that we saved a new one. So this all worked when we gave good information, but it didn't return. No, I don't see anything in here that's wrong.
I don't think it's necessarily about it being wrong. It's just not complete enough.
It's not getting the information out to it. Yeah. Okay.
It's needing to, I mean, how would we like create a,
Well, okay. So let's do this. How
basically
do we
we're taking
test?
that date object and
Yeah.
we have to validate that they actually passed a date
Right. Which should be
before we
here.
allow it to proceed to the save.
Right. It should be here.
You know what I
Right?
mean?
Yeah.
Well, that's saying that the form itself is valid. That doesn't necessarily mean the contents within each entry are valid,
Okay.
right?
All right. So
I mean,
how can we test it? How can we figure out, given the information we have, what
yeah,
what
under
could be
local
wrong?
vars, function to create task at callback response none. Okay. So response none.
Interesting. Interesting.
Question is that the are all those messages, is that the same as what we would see in like either the access or server logs?
Yeah, let's go have a look. Maybe there's something in there that could be helpful for us. Good call. Like where your head's at. And we may not be able to debug this in time. This may be something that remains a mystery. So this shouldn't have happened. So I definitely missed something off the documentation because that shouldn't throw this error. We've tested this before and I did it last time and worked just fine. So I definitely missed something. I'm not seeing exactly what it is I missed, but let's see what this is. So yeah, it says the same thing. So we got value, the view to do, create task doesn't work. So there's this traceback. Basically what that did here, see this traceback, it broke down the same thing, but sort of grouped it in different easier to read chunks than this big stream of text, but it took the same stream. Internal server error. Tasks new. That only happens when we pass it a bad data point here. But if we do that works just fine. Interesting. I gotta tell you, I honestly don't know how that happened. I don't know why that issue was happening. When we add this task, I'm expecting it to come out with, something other than an error. It should give me the little errors in red and say, hey, that's wrong. But let's look. Maybe,
Is there a limit on the date somewhere?
No, it shouldn't be on the day. So like this view looks good. Huh. That is that's all good. Huh. All right. Well, not exactly where we wanted to end up. I'm gonna have to figure out why it's doing that. That is definitely unexpected behavior. So what this should be doing is giving us a little error that says, hey, yeah, that's wrong. That's not good stuff. Don't put that in there. But instead is breaking and saying, we didn't get the HTTP request. So I would have to debug this a little bit more before I solve that problem entirely. And I don't want to waste the rest of the last 5 minutes that we have trying to figure out that small piece. So I wouldn't say that this is 100% done. That would be ideal if it gave us that warning and did not break at that point, and it should not if you follow the documentation. So I encourage everyone to get to this point, following the documentation. If you all recreate this error, if it happens to you too, then maybe there's something wrong in the documentation. Let me know. So definitely get to this point. You should at very least be able to add new items, new to-do list items, set their status, set their date. If you give it some semblance of a proper date, But again, you should be getting a red error that says that something was wrong. So try to get to that point. I'm going to try to debug and figure out where I went wrong here. I must have missed something along the way. But we are at the point that I wanted to get to be able to add these things, set up our task, our new task form, go through the mechanics of setting up a form that's external to it in case we want to do some extra logic, relying on the built-in parts so that it doesn't just accept something blank, has some built-in error handling. Again, some issue, some error, ironically, in our error handling. But any questions?
Are we missing an import, like a loader or anything, like in one of the HTML files, maybe?
Oh, I see what you're saying. No, it shouldn't be because that should have happened already. Like if that was the case, then when we navigated to here, it should break.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Like that shouldn't be the thing that breaks.
Okay.
So it could be. Any other questions?
I got a
Sorry,
return that enter valid date.
You get something that says enter validate and in red? Is it in red? Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So you're not getting the error and you followed the documentation.
I followed what you typed.
Yeah. Okay.
I just sent the link to mine's.
Yeah. I could hop in here and look at yours if you set me as your instructor.
Oh, it is. You are.
Okay. Here, you want to, what's your username?
CK Hired Labs.
This one? Cool. Nice. There's your to-do list. Got your add task. This is my task. All right, so let's see what happens here. There you go. All right, Cody, you're going to teach next week, man. All right, so I'm gonna have to look through again. I must have just missed something that I'm typing. I can't for the life of me figure out what it is. So, this is what you're supposed to get. Thanks for following along. Thanks for getting to this point, Cody. This is where I want everybody to get. This is the last little piece that when we enter the incorrect date, it should tell us like, hey, that's wrong, and that was the error that we spit out in the small red text that we try to do in our create.html error handling bit.
Can we access your site to try to debug?
We can. Now probably what I could do is just go through. I mean, what I'm gonna do to debug again is I'm just gonna like copy and paste the stuff out of the documentation because it's most likely I missed some little thing or put in the wrong order or something like that.
Okay.
And then it'll just solve the problem that way.
Okay.
Usually, it's usually faster than trying to find whatever I mistyped. But it's interesting that if you were following me while I was writing it, that you didn't make whatever mistake I made. So, and even worse is if I rewatch the video and then see it, I'll be like, there it is, and it's recorded. Cool. All right. Any other questions? No? All right, great. So I'm gonna stop sharing. And we were right at time, so I'm gonna stop the recording here soon. Next week, we're gonna finish up with our update and delete operations. The update operation will be very similar to create, except we're gonna start with the information that's there. So it's gonna be a little bit more complicated. Just basically doing the same kind of form stuff we did, except we're gonna populate that form with whatever's already there from the GET request, right? So we're gonna get the information, present it to the user at the form when they go there. And that's going to be the big difference, right? So other than that same process, views, URLs, template, and then some kind of navigation. And then after that, since next week's the last week, we're going to finish that up on Tuesday. And then Thursday, we're going to do Git, GitHub, and some more kind of like advanced topics type stuff and leave you with ways to save versions of the work you're doing and collaborate with other people from there. So cool. Have a good weekend. Practice all these things. Again, get to this point where you can add stuff, break it like I obviously did, and then do what I'm about to do and go debug and figure out what's going on. And hit me up with questions.
Right.
Cool. Thanks,
Have a
Jeff.
good one, y'all. Yep. Thank you.
All right.